All right, we are live. Welcome to Vegan World 2026 Online Summit with my personal hero, Dr. Sailesh Rao of climatehealers.org. And Deborah is also joining us. She's making all this happen. Thank you, Deborah. Now, we are this is the finale, the conclusion, the climax of the 2026 Online Summit. There's a physical summit, a real summit in Mesa, Arizona that's going to be happening starting Friday night, October 25th through the 27th. It's very exciting. We want you to be a part of it. So Dr. Rao, tell us, first of all, what this whole online summit has been about, what we've accomplished, and what's happening after that. What's next?
Yeah, the online summit was about looking at the solution for a vegan world 2026 from different angles. So we had different experts come along and talk about what the implications are for creating a vegan world from their perspective, and we had experts looking at all four aspects of a transformation to a vegan world. You need to have a new constitution. You need to have new institutions. You need to have new infrastructure, and you need to have a new currency. So we looked at all four of them, and then we looked at four types of actions that need to be done. There is hospice care that needs to be done, making sure that the old dies out and people transition from the old to the new. That's hospice care that needs to happen. There is illumination that needs to happen, showing people what is wrong with the old system and how we need to change, why we need to change to the new system. There is protection that needs to happen, which is showing how you protect the new as it's being born in the old. Because otherwise people are going to try and kill the vegan movement as quickly as possible, which they're trying, of course, but it's not happening. We are just not refusing to eat, and we're refusing to go along. And more of us are doing that. And so this is why it makes it impossible for people to do that. So that's protection. And finally, it's trailblazing. It's creating the new ways of governing ourselves, new ways of making decisions. And so that was the last talk that we had with Jamin Shively. So it's been really illuminating for me. It has been an educational experience for me. And I'm sure it's been an educational experience for people who have been watching as well. It's like we've been at this huge, it's like a fire hose you're drinking from for the last 12 days, for the last 10 days, yeah.
What do you mean when you say, and by the way, if you see me looking down, it's because I'm sharing this video. I urge everyone who is watching to just hit share from Climate Healers' Facebook page. What do you mean by when you say they're trying to kill the vegan movement? Who is they and why?
Well, the old system wants, the old system has mechanisms in place to protect itself. The old system is based on killing animals. I mean, it's the foundation of the system, We have to kill animals and turn animals into money. Animals are money. Trees are money, So we are sort of commodifying nature, commodifying beings. And the vegan movement comes along and says, no, we no longer want to commodify animals. So that just throws the whole thing out of whack, right, in the current system. So there are mechanisms in place in any given system to keep that system stable. So those mechanisms come into play. And it could be, it may not be conscious trying to kill. It is unconscious because people are trying to protect their businesses. They're trying to grow their businesses. Whether it is the hospital business, where you need a steady stream of people coming in to get bypass surgery. Otherwise, the equipment lies unused, and the hospital loses its. And this is actually what we discussed with Dr. Michael Clapper. Dr. Michael Clapper was talking about what happened to Dr. Kim Williams. I mean, he got called into the administrators of his hospital, who told him, you used to be the leading profit center for a hospital, and now you've become the leading loss leader because people are not coming to get bypass surgeries anymore.
Whoa. Yeah. Well, It's not even just unconscious. There was a whole article that appeared in the front page of the New York Times saying, oh, they said eating meat was unhealthy. Maybe not. And then it took them several days. This is the New York Times to come out with a rebuttal that essentially pointed out the links that those behind the study had to the meat and dairy industry, and that they had been involved in a similar operation with sugar. Now, the New York Times is perfectly capable of researching the backgrounds of the doctors and so-called scientists involved in these studies. Why did they put this on the front page of the New York Times without vetting it and giving it the research when anybody could look right at it and say, oh, this is obviously just a hit job on the plant-based movement because of Beyond Meat and Impossible Foods sweeping the supermarket shelves and the fast food joints. It was so obvious to me, and yet the best and the brightest can't figure that out. No, so I don't think it's just unconscious. I think it's conscious. I think that people who eat meat and who are invested in the system are resisting change. Dr. Rao, I asked you to work on a position paper to show that climate change is mostly caused by animal agriculture, because as long as people can say, including the New York Times, that it's 14%, and including Greenpeace, 14%, they're not going to make that change. Indeed, can you establish that animal agriculture is the leading cause of climate change? And how can we force the powers that be, the best and the brightest, all the news that's fit to print, and all the other people running our society right now who set the tone? It comes from the top down, whatever they say goes. How can we make them look at this and absorb the fact that animal agriculture is the leading cause of climate change? Because I maintain until that's done, you will have us being shushed and told to shut up, as I was told at the climate strike when I tried to bring in animal agriculture. And I was literally told, you be quiet. That's a direct quote. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, this I think was one of the most important things that came out of this summit. You asking me to write this paper, because I all along I thought they know these things, so who am I to tell them? Because they already know it. Then I realized that unless someone puts it together and shows them with evidence, they are going to pretend that they didn't see it. Mm-hmm. Just like what the New York Times did with that front page article, right? I'm sure that the retraction showing showing who was writing the paper did not come on the front page of the New York Times.
Well, if it did, it wasn't at the same level, and it didn't once it's in the New York Times, it goes all over the place. Then I saw it on Yahoo News the next day. Right. First thing I do to get a sense of what's happening in the world, when I have my coffee in the morning, I put on Yahoo News, because that's really shows you what's happening in the world. And let me tell you, there's a lot of stuff about meat alternatives almost every day, and the horrors of the pigs that are suffering from the viruses, and the dairy industry going down. I mean, there's a lot of vegan content. It's not official vegan content, but it's got a vegan implication. But unfortunately, when they issued their explainer, oops, guess what? Turns out these people have connections to the meat and dairy industry. It doesn't get the prominence globally, even if they did put it in a similar spot, which I don't know that they did, but I don't know that they didn't. It doesn't filter down to the rest of the world. The first story dominates, but continue on.
Yeah, so I started looking into it and putting my thoughts together, because I have pieces of that in my books already. I have written about it in blogs. I've given talks about it, but I didn't really put it together like you asked me to, So the fact that you asked me to forced me to do that. And then I realized I do have, solid evidence based on peer-reviewed data and based on the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC's fifth assessment report. I can actually show them why animal agriculture is the leading cause of climate change. And furthermore, if you don't do it this way, we have to go vegan first We have to make the world go vegan first. And if we don't do it this way, if we force the world to transform its energy infrastructure first, we are going to be going the wrong way. In fact, I would like to show a slide, with data from the IPCC, if possible, to explain what I'm talking about. If Deborah can make me the co-host, okay. So let me share that, and I'll show you what I mean.
Wow.
Can everyone see this?
Yes.
Okay. So you see, this is the human-caused radiative forcing from the IPCC. What that means is, this is how much we are heating up the planet from different parts of our activities. So from our CO2 emissions, cumulative CO2 emissions for the last 10,000 years of CO2 emissions, we are heating up the Earth by 1.6 watts per square meter, approximately. So it's like for every square meter of the Earth's surface, you're putting a 1.6 watt bulb, right? That's what we're doing. Now, from all the other emissions, from all the methane and the nitrous oxide and the HFCs, which are the air conditioning, and other gases, we are adding another 1.6 watts per square meter. Okay, so we're heating it up by another 1.6 watts per square meter. Now, methane is one of the largest components of that. And you know that 40% of that comes from animal agriculture, okay? Now, we are also cooling the Earth by minus 1.5 watts per square meter through aerosols. So aerosols are like sulfur dioxide. That's the main aerosol. That's the big blue one here. And sulfur dioxide is emitted when we burn coal. So all the coal-fired power plants in the world are causing the sulfur dioxide to happen, okay? Not in the US, because in the US we had this, the acid rain issue in the 70s. So we banned SO2 production. So we have forced all of our coal-fired power plants to install scrubbers that prevent sulfur dioxide from coming out. But other countries like India, like in Africa, when they burn coal, they don't put any scrubbers. So they are causing all this to happen. Okay. Now, imagine a situation where I wave a magic wand and I convert our entire fossil fuel infrastructure over to clean energy, renewable energy. So imagine that today, we do that. We eliminate all of the coal, oil, gas burning and replace it with solar panels and electric cars and so on, okay? If we did that, nothing changes here. You're still going to have the same radiative forcing from CO2, because all we have done is that we are not adding any more CO2 from fossil fuel burning. Okay, we're not adding any more CO2. Now Jane, can you hear us?
Actually, I just muted her for while you're talking, Sailesh, because she's got some background noise happening. So.
Oh, no problem. Yeah, I'll wait for her. I think she has some issue with her dog.
Yeah, she's got some construction going on in the background also.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah. This is an important one, and I have this slide in my Hawaii presentation. But this is something that the climate science community had known for a long time, because there was a paper written by Professor Jim Hansen a few years ago, and he called this the Faustian bargain, the bargain with the devil that we have made as humanity. Okay, so I think you have been muted, Jane.
Half an hour. How do you like that? You've made an incredible point here that to me is earth-shattering and earth-changing, because again, the New York Times the paper of record, the one that basically is history in the making, that sets the tone. In that article that they wrote about, oh, you can eat meat, right? Don't worry about it. They said, or in the rebuttal, in one of them, they said animal agriculture causes 14%. Right. This is what Greenpeace said when they texted me recently and asked me for my support. And I said, what's your position on going plant-based? And they sent me a very nice thing, but they say 14%.
Right.
If it's in fact the leading cause of climate change, and if in fact reducing the other factors first will accelerate climate
Right.
change, then it's essentially, I would say, just like the cops are chasing somebody, they come up to somebody on the street and they say, which way did they go? And the person says they went that way, when in fact they went that way.
Right.
It's just completely misleading.
Right.
The only way we are going to get them to change their tune is to put it together in a way that's indisputable,
Right.
with the citations, and get a whole bunch of scientists to sign on and issue it as an open letter and hold a news conference and force them to confront this issue. They will not do it on their own, I don't believe. Now, I want to be wrong. Please send it to them and see if they publish it. I know you had sent another letter or an editorial or an opinion piece to the New York Times and they neglected to publish it. So I would put it together and see. But I think it would have better heft if it had scientists, doctors, and a whole bunch of people signed onto it. This is how our society confronts things they don't want to look at. When you have all sorts of things happening in Washington, people feel empowered to speak when a whole bunch of former U.S. attorneys or former prosecutors sign a letter and say, what's happening in our government right now is wrong. It's in violation of the Constitution. It's outrageous. Then people stop and go, look, 100 lawyers, 200 lawyers, former prosecutors or whatever have signed this letter. It gives it weight. It gives it credibility.
Right.
You could be telling the 100% absolute truth, Dr. Rao, but everything I know about journalism, they will not accept it unless certain people that they consider to be sort of like okay will sign on to it. I was in the news media, the mainstream media, for 40 years. So I can tell you, I know how the system works from that perspective. The people who are vetting this are not scientists themselves, and they are more likely to listen to Al Gore, who on one of his recent 24-hour climate change events, I was watching it, Moby got up, he said something about animal agriculture, and Al Gore said, I think it's less than that. Right. Okay, so basically shutting him down and basically saying, perform, sing your song. And shout out to Moby for trying to get that word in. And they will listen to Al Gore. And Al Gore has not accepted the reality that you're presenting. Let me ask you a question. Is there any way, if you lay it out in completely unequivocal terms, that no person who is educated and who has the ability to understand the citations that you're quoting could dispute? Do you think an Al Gore would change his tune or not?
Well, we can corner them. Definitely, we can corner them. Especially when we put it together like that, like what I showed, and then explain why you have to get to a vegan world first. It's not just plant-based eating. You have to eliminate animal agriculture altogether, because animal agriculture is not only providing food for us, it's also providing skins, blood, bones, all kinds of things for the industries to use. And so all of that has to be eliminated for us to get the benefit of eliminating animal agriculture. right? So it has to be a vegan world. When you say, when we get to a vegan world, these are the benefits you're going to get. And you have to do that first before you change the energy infrastructure.
Well, I would say for the purposes of those people, because words are triggery. There are words, and I have to say that the word vegan is a trigger word. It's a good trigger word for the millennials and the Gen Zers. It's a very bad trigger word for people who are middle-aged, many middle-aged people who are in institutions of power. Look at it from this perspective. A major paper, just for example, has a food department. The food department has its own internal politics. They want to cover the pork festival and the this festival and the hottest restaurant that's torturing animals in a new way. They are extraordinarily resistant to this message. They look at it as censorship of their ability to cover all range of food. So they have their political power within that sector. I sat next to somebody at one unnamed job who was one of those people. So I know exactly how they think. Very nice person. But what I'm trying to say is it's like feudalism. Every department has their power structure, their influencers, people they know in the management. So if you come in with, we have to have a vegan world in your paper, I don't think it's going to fly. I think in scientific terms, we need to eliminate animal agriculture. And animal agriculture is not only the leading cause, but the way you spell it out. And I think that if you do that, I think that they're much more likely to hear it, as opposed to saying we have to have a vegan world. I mean, even vegans have come up to me and said, "What, are you kidding?" And I'm like, no. If you can't even envision what you want, how the heck are you going to achieve it? We want a vegan world, period. And, like you said, it sounds like back in the 50s when we said we wanted a man on the moon. People would say, "What, are you out of your mind?" Well, guess what? We got a man on the moon. So I do feel that how we structure the message is almost as important as the message itself. When they see the word V, they think, this is what they think. They think people hanging upside down from trees with brightly colored hair and vegan Birkenstocks. They don't think it's changing. It's changing rapidly because of Beyond Meat and Impossible Foods, rapidly. But in terms of them looking at the science, it's almost like the word V is unscientific, whereas plant-based is more palatable. And just saying we need to eliminate animal agriculture, here's why, boom, I think for scientific purposes would work better. What are your thoughts on that, Dr. Rao?
Yeah, we can frame it that way because it is about, we can call it a plant-based economy. Everything has to be plant-based, right? That's a plant-based economy, eliminating animal agriculture, because that releases 35% of the land area of the planet that we can return back to nature. And we know, just looking at the IPCC itself, we know that on the 35% of the land area of the planet that's currently being used for just grazing animals, the amount of carbon that is stored is only 6% of the amount of carbon that's stored on land in general. I mean, 6% of, in terms of its density, that's how much is stored. So meaning we can increase it by 94%, by a factor of 16, right? To bring it up to be on par with the average. And this is what reforestation would do. And when you reforest, that's how you're going to sequester all that extra carbon. And so there is also this whole thing about local sensitivity analysis versus global sensitivity analysis. And that's what I'm writing about in the position paper. Because the way they estimate the impact of animal agriculture today in scientific papers is by looking at a local sensitivity analysis. So they say, what happens if one person goes plant-based? Well, it doesn't really change much in the overall thing. It's just that how do you allocate the numbers? So they just assign less numbers to the person who's eating plant-based and more numbers to the other people who are eating meat, right? So it's not much of a difference. But the difference comes when you say, what if the whole world goes plant-based? That's when the land gets released. That's when you start sequestering carbon. So that's when the impact of going plant-based is actually you start sequestering instead of emitting carbon.
So I'm trying to boil that down in people terms so you understand. In other words, what I'm getting is the analysis says animals themselves and the production of animals causes like whatever they say, 14, 30%, whatever the number they use. What you're saying is the entire premise for how they're analyzing it is faulty, that you need to think about what would happen if those animals aren't killed, or the Amazon isn't destroyed, or we reforest the earth. All of that is part of the calculation that they're not calculating.
Right.
If a and my dogs are barking in agreement. Okay, Foxy. If let's say an acre of land is not destroyed for animal agriculture or to grow crops to feed animals, that acre of land is going to absorb carbon, and that is going to change the equation. See, I think that unfortunately, scientists think and they express themselves in different ways than regular people. As a reporter, I spent years talking to people about different things. I talked to NASA scientists. The thing that always would set me off is when somebody said it's too complicated for you to understand. No, anything that is actually true can be explained in terms that everybody can understand when the person themselves understands the subject matter really deeply. So I think your challenge, Dr. Rao, because I know you understand the subject very deeply, is not only to prove the point, put all the citations, but then either in an introduction or in a summary, but probably in an introduction because people don't even get to the summary. I mean, I'll tell you the truth. I read Livestock's Long Shadow. I read the first few sentences of it, paragraphs, and then I just went to a news story that summarized it. That's how people work. I'm not going to, I don't even have the qualifications to sit and read a scientific study. 90% of the people who are going to be deciding whether your information gets out there or not do not read the studies in question. They literally hand it off to somebody who might be biased and say, check this out. Does this make any sense? So if you don't summarize it in a people term where anybody can figure it out at the start, they're not even going to get to your argument. So that's another thing that you're going to need to do is write it in a way at the top where you issue a summary, and then you write the more scientific thing beneath with all the citations. And then you have scientists and doctors signing on to it. And then you present it to the New York Times and CNN and MSNBC, which MSNBC did a multi-day climate thing. And the only thing I've ever heard them say about meat is that we should talk less about eating meat and more about carbon. So they're completely, if what you're saying is accurate, and I think it is, they're completely misleading.
Yes, they are misleading. Yeah.
Yeah. So does that make any sense in terms of how this is just little old me feels that it should be structured?
Absolutely. In fact, that's how all papers are also structured, because we have to write an abstract first, or the summary of the paper. So I can send you the abstract. I've written the abstract already, and I can send you the abstract, and you take a look at it, and you can tell me what needs to be changed there, to make it more palatable. But that's the idea. The idea is in the abstract, you tell them, I'm doing a global sensitivity analysis, which shows that animal agriculture is a leading cause of climate change. Okay, so because it's the analysis itself will show, and it's based on peer-reviewed data from IPCC and other peer-reviewed scientific sources. So it's not something that we are pulling out of some obscure journal, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is definitely the most important thing, because people are literally being misinformed, and everybody's going with this 14%. I've even talked to leaders in the animal agriculture movement who say 30%, or I think it's something like 30%. Nobody really knows. There's this sort of talk about the World Bank economists. A couple of World Bank economists said it was 51%. But this is all just like talk. And nobody can, if I was able to say, for example, at the climate strike, hey, it's the leading cause. Here's the position paper, Jane Fonda. Look at it. Before you tell me to be quiet again, I want to hand this to you. I want you to read it. I'd like you to know that it's the leading cause. And here's why. That would give me so much more power so that people don't turn around to me and say, you're too loud, you're too militant. Yes, just like Greta Thunberg said, our house is on fire and I'm trying to wake people up.
Right.
So we're in a no-win situation if we don't have the proof. Let me give you an example. I covered crime for years. One of the most famous cases is the Casey Anthony trial.
Right.
She's a pathological liar who was accused of killing her baby. The prosecution in the opening statement made a great opening statement, very dramatic, but it basically kept focusing on her lies. Now, a lot of the experts said, wow, that was a brilliant opening statement. I said, I don't think it was a brilliant opening statement, because do you want to convict her of murder or do you want to convict her of lying? Well, guess what? At the end of the day, she was convicted of lying and she was acquitted of murder. So the point is that if you don't go after, we're saying that, to put it in a criminal trial perspective, or take this whole issue and approach it as a prosecution, we're saying animal agriculture is the murderer of our planet. And right now, what we're accusing animal agriculture of being is a liar. And it's being acquitted on the murder charge. It's not even being charged with murder. We need to charge animal agriculture with murder. They're the killers. And they're getting off scot-free. And they're sitting in the courtroom while we beat our chests over the fact that they're pathological liars.
Right. That's a great analogy. In fact, I've been watching, rewatching My Cousin Vinny, and how how the expert witness was out of work hairdresser who threw out the conviction, because she was so right on. It's exactly the same misdirection that's happening here. They're telling us to go focus on fossil fuels, when the scientists know, and a lot of scientists know. There was a paper written by Jim Hansen. People read that paper. So they know that if you address fossil fuels first, you're going to cause the planet to heat up faster than it does today. And it's only by sequestering carbon that you can start addressing the fossil fuel issue. So only after you reduce the carbon in the atmosphere. And that has to happen through animal agriculture. Yeah.
What I'd like to see is a headline in the New York Times that says, oh my God, the calls to end fossil fuels are, alarms sounded on ending fossil fuels. Direction needs to be animal agriculture elimination, something to that effect, because that's essentially what you're saying. Right. And I would like, my test is, when I understand it, I can explain it to somebody in an argument, a debate, a dialectic. Then I feel like it would have been massaged and made palatable enough for everybody to make the argument. Because it's got to be in the paper, but it's also got to be when you go to an environmental place and they're serving meat, and you got to be able to make that argument. Or when somebody's doing a speech at a climate strike, or when, they wanted teenagers to be speaking about this. Well, teenagers are not scientists who can articulate these complex thoughts. We need scientists, we need professionals. So do you feel that you can get some scientists on board with this?
I'll approach them. I think I can get some doctors on board with it for sure. Climate scientists, I'll approach Jim Hansen and ask him if he would sign on to my position paper. Because I think because he wrote the original paper that I got that information from. He's the one who pointed out that the aerosols are only up in the atmosphere for 3 to 5 days. They disappear after 3 to 5 days. So we have to keep pumping those aerosols up there by burning coal. And he said, we have this bargain with the devil that we need to do, because even when we stop burning coal, we have to extract the sulfur from the coal and burn that just to keep the aerosols going. Otherwise, we're going to start heating up the earth at double the rate that we're heating it up today. So he wrote that paper. So I can approach him, and he knows about what is happening with the animal agriculture. I mean, he knows that the land that's being used for animal agriculture is storing so little carbon, because they all have these models. They know that. Okay, it's storing only 1.1 million tons per square kilometer. Okay, whereas the average is 15 million tons per square kilometer. That's the average. So that if you just bring that 1.1 up to 15, you can sequester so much carbon. You can actually reverse climate change. So the only way to bring the CO2 levels down to 350 parts per million so that we are in the safe zone for climate is by eliminating animal agriculture. No other way.
So let me see if I can translate as a layperson. What you're saying is everybody's saying stop burning coal, but a byproduct of burning coal is aerosols.
Mm-hmm.
And aerosols actually have a cooling effect.
Right.
So if we stop burning coal, that would actually increase the temperature and accelerate climate change. What we need to do is reforest the earth first.
Right.
And then when we have enough trees that are absorbing the carbon, then we can gradually reduce the fossil fuels. The coal. Right. Is coal and fossil fuels interchangeable?
Coal is the number one source of emissions within the fossil fuel basket. There is oil, coal, gas. Those are the three main ones.
So let me ask you this. I mean, it's really interesting because obviously we all fill up. Look, I have a hybrid electric vehicle. I'm going to get to an electric vehicle one of these days, but I have a Prius hybrid electric, so it's very fuel efficient. I wish I had an electric vehicle, but whatever. But the point is, we all know what gasoline is. We all know what was the other one? Oil?
Yeah, oil.
Well, oil, isn't
oil
that gas?
And natural gas.
Okay.
Gas.
So natural gas is what? Where does that go?
It goes in power plants where they burn natural gas to make electricity. It goes in our heating, so we heat our homes with natural gas. So we have cooking with natural gas. Yeah.
Okay. So, you mean like when you turn on the flame, that's natural gas?
Right.
Okay. I have an electric stove, but okay. Then coal, what do they use coal for? Because when I think of coal, I think of an old choo-choo train where they're throwing coal on there. And I'm like, what do they even use coal for today?
Electricity, generating electricity.
Where? I mean, in America, they use coal?
Yeah. In fact, the Navajo coal-fired power plant is the largest coal-fired power plant in the country. And it is used to pump water from Lake Mead to Phoenix, Arizona, and to Tucson, Arizona.
Who knew? That's intense. So you're saying that, but it's not natural gas that creates ozone, and it's not gasoline that creates ozone, only the coal part.
Aerosols, yeah, aerosols.
Aerosols. So you could reduce gasoline and natural gas. It's the coal that we shouldn't be reducing.
Right.
Now, where is coal in terms of the three? Which is used most? Which is the biggest?
Coal is number one.
Above
worldwide.
Gasoline?
Yeah, it's number one among all the fossil fuels. It's number one still.
So when people get up and say we need to eliminate fossil fuels, they're literally misleading us, according to you.
Right.
Yes. Wow. And this is just, how come Greta Thunberg, her whole thing now, instead of talking about veganism and animal agriculture, it's switched to fossil fuels?
There is a lot of money to be made when you switch fossil fuels. When you switch, so this is why she's getting access to these forums. I mean, if she's going into the UN and speaking, someone is giving her access to go to the UN and speak. And those people have a different motivation than she does. So those people have the motivation to make money off of this.
Right.
And it could be that they are all, in the business of converting coal into solar energy or whatever. I don't know what their investments are in, but it's all about making money, right? That's what's driving the current system. Everyone in it is in it to figure out how to make more money.
It's just, everybody's saying the thing. They're going to meetings on air quality and trying to talk about, nobody wants to hear about the animal agriculture aspect. We're really at a horrible, crucial juncture here. And if we don't get it together, your position paper could be what's standing between human extinction, not to mention all the animals going extinct, and survival of our species. That's how important it is. And we're talking about it on a forum with half a dozen people or 24 people listening. I mean, I feel like crying tears of blood in rage and helplessness. And then to be scolded when we try to get the word out. It's beyond comprehension. It's just, human beings are not, part of it is that they say, well, human beings, operate in their own self-interest. No, we don't. We are very self-destructive. So I think that what you're doing is absolutely important. And I want to sort of recap again the whole notion of Vegan World 2026, the climate summit, the summit that's happening in Arizona, and the position paper that you're working on. Can you encapsulate that, Dr. Rao?
Yeah, so the summit that we've been on for the last 10 days is looking at the solution from the perspective of the truth, not the lies that we've been told, the delusions that we've been told to accept, because there's a lot of lying going on because people are trying to figure out how to make more money. It's all about marketing and lies. That's the current system that we are in. And then we're going to come together in Arizona and later this month from October 25th through 27th to talk about the currency, talk about the Constitution, to renew the institutions, renew the study groups that we formed last year, which were all about the institutions and the infrastructure for a vegan world, so that we can put together the foundations of what a vegan world would look like, in which normalcy is not, non-violence is normal, as opposed to the current system in which violence is normal. So it's about looking at all those 7 core shifts and figuring out how each one of those are impacted and how each one of those can be undertaken, for us to get to the vegan world. And the position paper, to me, as you said, is becoming more and more crucial. And it is, I'm so glad that you asked me that question on the second day and made me look at it, because all along I thought it's not my position to write that paper. It's not my job to write that paper because it should be a climate scientist writing that paper. Then I realized I'm just as qualified as those people to write that paper, because I've been looking at it from a systems perspective for the last 12 years, and I know the data inside out by now. I've been following all their papers. So who better to synthesize the work of all the climate scientists than a systems scientist? So I should be writing that paper. And,
exactly. Now, when you write a paper, again, ignoramus here, if you submit it to some kind of journal, would that give it more credibility? Like, in other words, then it comes out in, I don't know, I'm making up a name, Scientific American or something like that.
Right. Yeah, no, I was thinking of, Science Magazine, New Scientist or something like that. But it's best to go with a co-author that the editor of the New Scientist knows, or the editor of Science Magazine knows, because they don't know me. I am in the technology. I used to be in the technology field. People know me there, but they don't know me in this. So I would suggest, we need to get co-authors like Dr. Barnard, or someone that gives credibility to what has been written, so that they can then present it to the editors and get it published. That's my goal, is to actually get it published in a reputable magazine like that.
And in other words, when they, like with this phony meat study that they managed to get on the front page of the New York Times, that then they had to do another story saying, oops, they have connections to the meat and dairy industry.
Right.
They published it in some kind of scientific publication that is also known to publish these kinds of things.
Right. It's the Annals of Internal Medicine.
Yeah. And apparently it's been on the hot seat before about publishing studies that are like, gee,
Right.
isn't it interesting that this is so pro some industry? And so, you have to always follow the money. But what would be the most credible institution to achieve, to get your paper that then the New York Times would have to say, oh, I got to publish this. It's got to be on the front page of the New York Times.
Right. Yeah, that's a great goal to have, but let us, it has to be some climate publication, some maybe AGU journal or something like that. And I can talk to Jim Hansen and see which one he would recommend.
I think that's a great idea, because if you get people who are not known as vegan advocates, to be involved, then it seems less like, I think there's a kind of a pair of glasses that the average person puts on, and they kind of go, oh, I'll use an analogy. If somebody's pushing something at a protest or something, and you hear a couple of things they say, and you go, oh, that's a person with a certain religious bent. I can tell what they're about that. That's their thing, right? And so you kind of just discount them at that point. So I think if you have sort of what I would call neutral scientists who are not known for veganism necessarily, sign on to this, that would give it tremendous weight. And even let them be, the first person, the first name, because they're much more likely to look at it and to actually read the information. And that's the whole thing. I mean, I was so desperate that I actually sent our documentary about you to an anchor at MSNBC who I happen to have his email from years ago. I said, here, please watch this before you do your climate event. I don't know if that happened, but I mean, I do anything I can to try to get the truth to people. It reminds me of the days in the Soviet Union where people were printing out little leaflets and handing them to people, outside in the cold. Here's the truth. Here's the truth. We are also living in that kind of society where the irony is, this whole debate about fake news, the biggest fake news on the planet right now is that fossil fuels are the leading cause of climate change, when in fact it's animal agriculture that is the leading cause of climate change. And if we are to follow the advice of the so-called expert environmentalists and reduce coal, we will accelerate climate change, because coal emits aerosols that have a cooling effect and that are actually helping right now to reduce the temperatures. This is very simple that people could understand, but it's not getting out there. And it will not get out there until legitimate, accepted scientists put it together and say, here's the real story, and you have to look at it. I mean, to me, this encapsulates the entire problem. There are probably 4 institutions, media institutions, that will determine how people feel about climate change. CNN, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, MSNBC, Washington Post. That's it. Game over. If this information is presented to them in a way that they are forced to absorb and go, oh bleep, we got to change, then everything will change. I'll give another example. You can be smoking cigarettes all day long, but the day you go to the doctor and he says, you have a cough, what's your history of cigarette smoking? I smoked for 20 years. Okay, let's do that x-ray. Oh my God. Okay, I'm sorry to tell you this, but you have cancer. Boom. Everything changes. Cellular level. The reason I say that, I used to smoke. I gave it up when I gave up drinking 24 years ago. I had a cough. I went to a doctor at one of the best hospitals here. He gave me that same lecture. And then when he came back, he said, you know what? You are the only person today that I have had the privilege of saying you don't have cancer. Every other person who came into my office today, I had to tell them they had cancer. And he basically looked at me like I was a stupid idiot for ever having smoked, and I was, but that I was lucky. So when the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, CNN, and MSNBC look at this and they go, oh, bleep, we can't smoke anymore. We got cancer. That's when the whole world will change. And unfortunately, I don't think it's going to happen before that. So I feel, Dr. Rao, the entire world is resting on your shoulders. And I'm sorry to put that responsibility on you, but as far as being in this movement for 30 years and looking around all the time, you are the only person that is articulating the truth today 100%.
Well, I'm so glad that I had this conversation with you, because when you explained it to me, explained it back to me, and I know that you understand the position I have about coal and animal agriculture, I know it's going to get everywhere. I know it's going to get everywhere. I know you understand now, and that's the best thing that has ever happened, if you ask me, in this summit. Because this is going to get out. This is going to get out. Yeah. I will write that paper. Yes, of course.
Yes. And one last thing, when people think of aerosols, they think of hairspray canisters. That's the first thing I thought about. I go, aerosols, hairspray? Seriously, this is this mind here. I'm being honest. How are we going to explain that aerosols are not, because they always said, don't spray aerosols. So everybody thinks of aerosols as a bad thing. You're saying it's actually a good thing. Can you figure that out for us?
Yeah, see, the aerosols, the main aerosol in the atmosphere, aerosols are anti-greenhouse gases. So they actually cool the earth as opposed to heat. They're not like a blanket. They just, they prevent sunlight from coming in. Okay. So they're like a blanket around where they cool the earth. And the main aerosol is sulfur dioxide. So every molecule, that we put up into the atmosphere, it's either it's a greenhouse gas or an aerosol. It's one or the other. It's either cools or it heats. If it's neutral, it's very new, it's somewhere in between, right? So the main aerosol is sulfur dioxide, and sulfur dioxide becomes sulfuric acid in the atmosphere after a while. So it only stays up in the atmosphere 3 to 5 days, and it comes down as sulfuric acid. So this was the reason we had acid rain in the 70s. Acid rain was causing the Catskill Mountains the Catskill forests to die out. And so people were very up in arms about it. And so they passed the Clean Air Act in the US. And when they passed the Clean Air Act in the US, they got all the coal-fired power companies to put scrubbers that would capture the sulfur dioxide before it was released into the atmosphere. And guess what happened? The planet started heating up. So if you look at from the 70s, the planet started heating up because the US passed the Clean Air Act.
So what would have happened if they didn't? Isn't sulfuric acid a bad thing? I mean, you're kind of saying something that's bad is good, and people might have a hard time digesting that.
Yeah, so what happened then was, we cleaned up our forests, we cleaned up our atmosphere, but the other countries were now burning coal without the scrubbers. So when China took over the manufacturing, they started producing a lot of sulfur dioxide. They got a lot of acid rain on themselves. And now they're trying to clean up. And so that is heating up again. So we're going through the same process of people figuring it out one by one, by themselves.
But I mean, what about sulfuric? what happens to this? I mean, isn't the sulfuric acid bad too, in the sense that what does it do to forests?
Yeah, it kills forests. I mean, if you put it, if sulfur dioxide comes down in large quantities, it will start hurting the vegetation as well. So right now we have a certain amount of sulfuric acid that's coming down because of our aerosol emissions, but some of it is coming down on land, some of it is coming down in the ocean, depending on where we are burning it, right?
So sulfuric acid is not that bad if it hits the ocean?
Well, it just acidifies the ocean some more, right?
But I guess what I'm saying is, if people say, wait a second, you're saying that we need more aerosols, but aerosols are terrible and they're destructive. You're suggesting we do something destructive. What's your response to that?
My response to that is, we have a certain amount of aerosols that we are putting up into the atmosphere right now. We are also putting up a whole bunch of greenhouse gases right now. But our first job should be to make a change that would allow us to suck the CO2 down, suck the greenhouse gases down, and then simultaneously, as we suck that down, then we can reduce the aerosols. I'm not saying we should keep putting the aerosols up there. We should reduce that too. But let's do the plant-based economy first, and start sucking down the CO2 into regenerating forests, and then reduce the CO2 reduce the aerosols from coal burning. Okay,
got it.
So it's an engineering process.
Yes, it's just you're saying the order is wrong.
The order is wrong
right now.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Wow. So, Deborah, do you want to take over, because we've been talking quite a while?
Well, the questions are blowing up in both of the chats, so we can go to questions. I have a question. Can you tie into that, Dr. Rao, what Jamin talked about yesterday with the solar? Yeah,
the solar radiation management.
Yes.
So Jamin talked about, if things are heating up really fast in the Arctic and it's an emergency, because, you look at the fires in California. I mean, California, both north and south, they're having so many fires that the PG&E is just cutting off electricity for 1.5 million people, right? So, we are in an emergency when something like that happens. So what Jamin suggested was that we need to start putting reflectors out there so that we can send some of the sunlight back up, so it doesn't heat the earth, So even 1% of the Earth's surface, if we can cover with mirrors that would send the sunlight back up, it will have a cooling effect. Right? So
Okay.
that's
Wow.
And he said, you can just take potato chip packets. If you look at the inside of a potato chip packet, it's a reflecting material.
Yeah.
It's that same reflecting material that we put out on 1% of the Earth's surface that would have an impact on cooling impact.
Well, let
Okay.
me ask you,
So in
okay,
order-
there's a question I have. Okay, you have 90 degrees, you have these reflectors. It's not going to make it 89 degrees or 88 degrees when it hits that reflector and goes back up, is it?
No. The way it would work is, we are heating up the Earth by about 1.6 watts per square meter right now, right? And the sun is giving us about 130 watts per square meter. Okay, that's how much the sun is providing on average. So 1.6 watts is about 1.5%. So 1.5% of the sun's heating that we are adding to it. So we now have to reflect, say, about 1% of the sun's energy back to undo what we have done. So, which is like putting mirrors on 1% of the Earth's surface.
Wow.
Okay, so in order of things, you were talking about the order, just needing to reverse the order. So that fits in as that's got to happen first, and then your pieces are in the
I
other
would
pieces
say,
are coming?
I mean, the solar radiation management should happen in tandem with making everybody go vegan, go plant-based.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So-
No reason those can't happen at the same time.
Yeah, it can happen simultaneously as we are manufacturing those, because those things we are already manufacturing like millions of square meters, square miles of that, because just to make potato chip packets, we're selling billions of potato chip packets, and then we are throwing them in landfills. That's stupid, right? So we can use that to reflect the sunlight back.
Wow. Go ahead,
Okay.
Deborah.
All right, so we have a lot of questions. I'm going to start at the beginning and then work through, and I'm going to try to switch back and forth between the Zoom and the Facebook. So this was the first question I saw come in. My biggest concern after seeing the climate strikes is how are we going to get the so-called environmentalists who still eat animals and their byproducts and are supporting the animal ag to open their hearts and minds and make the connection that 51% plus is responsible for climate change. Jane was silenced over and over again during the climate strike while trying to spread the message of veganism. It is infuriating that people act concerned about the planet and yet they don't want to hear anything about giving up meat, dairy, eggs. Now, you talked about the white paper with that, and I think, that's a great solution. I mean, we saw that when we tried to advertise this summit, when I boosted the event post about the summit, and it was within hours attacked by bots. And we had almost 200
Negative
messages.
Yeah.
Negative messages that were, just, and all the laughs and the, haha vegans. And I targeted it specifically for vegans, vegetarians, and environmentalists. So that's, the same thing, targeting the message to the people who we believe want to hear it. And there are the bots, whether they're computer bots or human bots or corporate bots that are intercepting. So, anyway, I know you talked about the white paper. I think that's going to be a fabulous tool for a lot of us to be able to have and to open eyes where people can't be as combative, but they still will. So any other suggestions?
I think it's education, it's about education. And first getting, I was so thrilled when Jane repeated back what I said and did it so articulately. She's like the perfect news person.
Yes, and in plain English that everyone can grasp
everyone can understand.
And repeat.
So now I know she understands, and she's going to be a force of nature now from this.
Well, I just having been a reporter for 40 years, I would go into situations, you go into the chaos, when you're coming into a new subject, you don't understand it, you break it down into small pieces, you kind of try to put the puzzle together, and then you can spit it out in a people term. And that's one of the problems with what we're talking about is wherefore, whereas. We've got to be able to just encapsulate it in a way that everybody goes, oh yeah, wow. If the coals have make something also that cools the earth down and we just get rid of the coal, it's going to increase the temperature more. We've got to do something first. We've got to change the order. Boom. We've got to reforest the earth first. That's going to absorb the carbon. Then we can get rid of the coal because the coal also, it heats, but it also lowers the temperature at the same time. Right. But I have a question about that. If it heats it and lowers the same temperature at the same time, wouldn't that cancel out and make it neutral?
Out. Yeah, it is. Right now, it is neutral. Fossil fuels are kind of neutral.
Wait, how can coal be carbon neutral or neutral and people beating their chests about coal? I don't understand this.
It's misdirection. See, this is something that Jim Hansen, wrote about this a few years ago. He said, even when we stop burning coal, we have to suck the sulfur out of the coal and burn it just to cool the earth. Because all the impact of fossil fuels and all of the CO2 emissions that we have done over the years is cumulative. It's added up over the years, and that's what is causing the heating, 1.6 watts. So if you stop burning coal, that 1.6 watts will still be 1.6 watts. It's not going to go away until you suck it down with bringing back forests. Okay, you have to bring the forests back to suck the CO2 down. And only then will that heating go away.
Well, I always say politics makes for strange bedfellows. That's the cliche, but I would think the coal industry would be out there with full-page ads in the New York Times explaining this. I mean, coal is the first thing people talk about when they say we need to clean up the environment, get rid of the coal. And of course, it's political. I don't want to get too political, but the conservatives are like, no, let's keep our coal miners. And then the liberals are like, get rid of the coal miners, transition them to something else. But you're saying no, that's not even that we shouldn't be worrying about coal. Let coal continue to do its thing while we worry about something else. I mean, if you use a medical analogy, I think what you're saying is, everybody's worried about somebody who has a sprained foot when the person's systemically suffering from cancer. That's what we've got to look at, that they're looking at the wrong problem.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the coal in the US, coal is already has scrubbers. So it's not producing the aerosols in the US. It's producing aerosols in Africa. It's producing aerosols in China. At least it used to. I think they are guessing that the reason why the last few years have been so hot, it's because China has been putting scrubbers. And so they have been cleaning up their act on their coal-fired power plants. And that's why
this is such a mind blower. I think the other thing that I think we should do is get to China. I keep saying this, get to China, get to China. China's the biggest pork consumer. China is obviously, really right now fighting for dominance on the world stage because of what's happening in the United States. They could take over. I mean, if somebody could get to like Xi, the president, and explain this, they could solve it in a second. They could solve the whole thing, because I think they eat like a lot of the Amazon's being destroyed to send the cattle to China. They eat the most amount of pork. I think 50% of the Earth's animals are consumed in China or something like that. I mean, yes, we have to wake up Americans, no doubt, but China, somebody's got to get to China. Somebody's got to get to China. They could solve the whole thing.
Right. Yeah. I mean, they're a big part of the solution. I mean, obviously, every human being is a part of the solution. We are all literally returning back to the way we used to live indigenously, but with technology now, so that we can do our job as a caretaker species.
Okay, I'm going to read some of the comments on Facebook. Oh, where'd they go? Let's see. And my thing keeps scrolling here. Here we go. Okay, so here's one for you, Jane. It says, Jane, we saw the video you shared of you at the Climate March strike recently where you chanted, "Go vegan or go extinct." We thought of a couple more chants or sign phrases in case you're interested in. It says, climate change is scary, quit meat, eggs, and dairy. And for climate change, raise the red flag. #1 cause is animal ag.
I love it. Let's. Can you type those out and text them to me? I love them.
I tell you what, I'll email them. How's that? Because I'll save the chats.
You said you were the most depressed in India, where you saw the beautiful animals and how we're destroying the world because you were in this incredible garden. I got the most depressed at that climate strike march. I cried because I said, if these folks, the ones who are praying for the Amazon, literally right there, who are talking about the Amazon going up in flames, if these folks can't get it together to mention why the Amazon is going up in flames, that it's cattle ranchers, 80% at least, right, and that is in the mainstream media, then we're all lost. I got really, really depressed. But kind of like you, when you said you saw a bright light, I saw a bright light. And that's when it came to me like a brick hitting my head. We have to prove it to the world in a way where they cannot dispute it, that this is the leading cause. Until we can say that, they can say, no, we're filled up with speakers, or, it's not working out this next time. When we establish unequivocally that animal agriculture is the leading cause of climate change, responsible for more greenhouse gases than anything else, and it's the thing we have to change first, immediately, with urgency, before fossil fuels. And in fact, to just change fossil fuels first will worsen the problem by reducing the amount of aerosols in the air, which have a cooling effect. Then they will have to look at this, because ultimately it's a consumer issue.
Right.
It's consumers consuming meat and dairy products that's causing all of it. If consumers did not consume, boom, They'd stop burning the rainforest. They'd stop destroying all the forests. We could take almost half of the surface of the earth that's used for agriculture and reforest a good percentage of it. Case closed, problem solved. So that is really the number one priority, is to prove it in a way where nobody can deny it. You know, it reminds me of the cigarette thing. I mean, we had doctors promoting cigarettes. I was just watching a documentary on advertising. And then there came a point where it was like, no, cigarettes are toxic. Cigarettes are bad. Boom. We haven't hit that yet because of the misinformation campaigns and the denial and the addiction. But, you know, that's where we have to get to. We've got to make meat the cigarettes of our era.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. And the problem we have is that 98% of the people are smoking. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's why they don't want to see it. They don't want to see it, but we have to show them. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And, you know, as Julie mentioned in the comments, the word vegan is associated, has such a negative connotation associated with so many people now. And, you know, I love that I mean, plant-based is a little more palatable for people. Stop animal agriculture, as you said, Jane, is going to, you know, perhaps be a title that people will read and hear, you know, that if we leave the vegan word out, you know, and I know that Dr. Rao, your message is Vegan World 2026. It is the hard, like, yes, this is the facts. If we can somehow separate it from that association with you know, as you said, the crazy people hanging from trees, chaining themselves to, you know, whatever.
They're not crazy. Okay, let me just say
no,
this,
no, I
Deborah.
didn't mean to imply that they're
wait,
crazy.
Yeah, no,
and I'm saying that
look,
we need to disassociate from that
right.
perception that people have.
Society has put us in a no-win situation. PETA has 19 lawyers. They issue very detailed, in-depth, rational arguments against all sorts of animal cruelty that never get covered in the media. Then in desperation, they put some women in some lettuce outfits, and then, yes, the media comes and attacks them. That's called a no-win situation. We're the sane ones. They're the crazy ones. And so I'm not an apologetic vegan at all. And I totally understand why Dr. Rao wants to use the word vegan. I'm just saying, for the purposes of this position paper,
right,
not for the entire movement. I'm vegan out and proud, but for the purpose of the entire movement, I think for the purposes of the position paper, I think it would be best to look at it not from a perspective of eating, because this is looking at scientists. It's looking at it from a perspective of animal agriculture is the number one thing that has to go away now with urgency. And here's scientifically why, and the media needs to acknowledge this. This is in our Constitution that we created, our declaration, Dr. Rao. We created a declaration, and one of the principles that we created in Costa Rica with you was the media needs to start reporting the truth about animal agriculture's role in climate change.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, this position paper is necessary for that.
Yes, right. Okay. And just for the record, I was not suggesting that the word vegan go away, just so that we could somehow get people to see and not associate what has been associated with veganism when they hear the word. I have had
No, I'm sorry.
Say, yeah, you know, it's just no way, that's too inconvenient, but try the inconveniences that we'll face if we don't do it. That's where your inconveniences are going to come in. Right. You know, yeah. So anyway, okay, let me go back to some of these. Let's see. I was asked yesterday about why I'm so involved in encouraging people to go plant-based and the entire aspect about my disciplines. That person told me, well, you have to be thankful to us meat eaters because we are making you a favor by eating the herbivores animals and that are eating your food. Okay.
Yeah.
You know, they'll think of anything, I guess, right?
Yeah.
Some people are far from understanding 1 hour of useless speech, but it says we need networks and to help. Okay, so I think this is referring to you. We need networks to help Dr. Rao get this message out there. And as Julie says, our voices are not falling on deaf ears. They do plant seeds. They plant seeds, and when this evidence becomes more available, it'll tie together for them.
Right. And you know, Dr. Rao, something else just occurred to me in terms of reaching people. When you look at the power centers today, yes, in the terms of the media, we've talked about it. New York Times, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, CNN, MSNBC, maybe a few others in there, but those are like the biggies. Now, there's also technology. You have the Sergey Brins and these other incredible bright minds who are open to veganism. And if we got them to look at this position paper, because these people can change the world in a heartbeat. You know, we know that the guy from Cambridge Analytica said, the highway that Donald Trump rode to the White House was Facebook. If we get some key leaders of technology to look at this position paper, Bill Gates, okay, he is aware of this issue. Sergey Brin, all these types, somehow get it in front of them and make a presentation to them. I think they would provide sort of like the new media might be the platform to, because they're not as advertiser based. I mean, if you look at why we're getting content on places like Amazon Prime and Netflix, great documentaries that you've been involved with, Dr. Rao, Cowspiracy, What the Health. And we also have on Amazon Prime, Countdown to Year Zero, which is Jane and Shane's documentary about Dr. Rao. They're not advertiser based. They're not beholden to the meat, dairy, and pharmaceutical commercials. By the same token, along the same lines, the Facebooks and the Twitters of the world, yes, obviously they get advertising, but it's not beholden in the same manner as a TV show that every 12 minutes is interrupted by constipation commercials and erectile dysfunction commercials. So they have a little bit more leeway to perhaps get the message out. I would think to present to Google, Microsoft, and Facebook this position paper and use whatever connections we have to get in front of them would be maybe the first step, because if they say, you know what, this makes sense, then it's not as easy for the old school traditional media to reject it.
Right. Yeah, no, it's good. I mean, we will do what we can, you know. I mean, I want to have it done by the time I come to the Countdown to Year Zero film screening.
Wow.
In Chelsea. I want to have it done so that you can hand it out to people there as well.
Well, let me say this. If you do that, I could issue a news release and say that we are going to present, and I'm happy to go to the printer and get recycled paper and print it out. And I'm trying to get some good influencers there. And the New York Animal Rights Movement is going to be there, from Donnie Moss of Their Turn, Adita of New York Class, Nora Consta-Marino of Animal Cruelty Exposure Fund. All of those people are going to be there, and they know how to spread the word. And I could issue a news release and go over it with you, of course, saying a major position paper that shows that animal agriculture is the leading cause of climate change and must be addressed before fossil fuels, particularly coal. And then we issue that, we could maybe get some media there.
Sure. Yeah, I would love to do that.
So, you know, we have our little panel. We have our panel of the Sierra Club and Greenpeace and you and me. But after that, it's a free country. We could go outside and hold a news conference right outside the theater and hand this out to the major news media.
Yeah, you are the news person, you know.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm just a technical guy. Yeah.
No, I mean, you know, I don't have the strings to necessarily bring all the major media, but I can work with a public relations firm that might and try to get media there. If, you know, we have this position paper. I don't know if it's the time, because you want to present it to the mainstream media sort of fresh, like a premiere. You know what I'm saying? But it could be something. Let's talk about it offline. We could talk about how to strategize about that.
Sure. But at least the content will be there, you know, by
And you
the
can
20
give it to Greenpeace, and you can give it to the Sierra
That's my
Club, and
goal.
you can, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And Jane, I'll send you a list. Somebody yesterday sent or typed in a number of vegan friendly outlets that, you know, they're not speaking to the people who maybe is speaking to the choir, but at least it's building at the grassroots level. But I'll send you that list.
Well,
list
one
of,
thing I want to say
publications.
is, Dr. Rao, The Intercept, which is independent journalists run by Pulitzer Prize winning Glenn Greenwald, has been very, very open to hearing our message. And
Right.
that might be the place to get it launched, on The Intercept. And we could
Right.
work perhaps with Wayne Shung, who's very close to Glenn Greenwald, to get the message out. That's another
Yeah.
possibility.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so here's another question here in the chat. Given the need for high speed and large scale solutions, and given that we have made significant advancements already in the energy sector, how does it make sense to put the brakes on that at this point? By all means, we need to get the message out about plant-based economy, but can we afford to create confusion about the solution at this point?
Well, we have to point out the misdirection. Because, you know, people are dying because of this. Animals are dying because of this misdirection. Because we need to address the meat and dairy industry first.
Yeah. And Julie gave a response here. Methane is so much more potent than CO2, but has a very fast half-life. Get rid of the methane immediately, animal agriculture, and we have a chance to combat this monster. I think that's, she also comments that probably on our other conversation about using the V word, as she says, this is the reason Madhavi and I decided to keep the V word out of the title of our 2-day conference. Health and sustainability is what we came up with.
Right.
Yeah, and there's one that says that people are currently so afraid of becoming vegan because they believe they're going to get malnutrition and iron deficiency. We need to educate doctors too. Let's see. And you know, I'll just say Dr. Clapper's interview was great about that
Right.
topic. If you missed
Right.
that, go back and listen to that one. Okay. Let me go back to, this is moving so fast, I'm having a hard time staying, keeping it from scrolling on the Facebook. Okay, there's some, let's see. Last night I went to a meeting on air quality in Phoenix, and I tried to talk about climate healers to a few people at the socializing part of the event. When I'm able to go up and speak at the next opportunity, I find that paper you will come out with will save all our lives.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, that's, I think,
We have to keep at it, you know.
Yes, and a recommendation, a strong recommendation to read your books, Karma, Dharma, and Carbon Yoga.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Barnard just shared Countdown to Year Zero on his personal Facebook page, so he may be open to it.
That's awesome.
Yes, another plug for the paper, and also for James Hansen. Someone shared a YouTube video from James Hansen here, and I'm not sure. Let's see, did she? Someone is recommending you to be on a show, but I'm not sure what the show is. So I'll ask for that information. See if she. And someone wanting clarification on aerosol sprays. Should we use them or avoid them?
Well, aerosol sprays themselves, I think, have different substances. They're not made from sulfur dioxide. There's some other substances. So I don't know much about them. So don't take my recommendations for those.
Okay. Thanks for the inspiring input and the practical strategies as well. Jane, are you connected to the major networks? As mentioned, to reach out to the journalists in different ways. Any way we might need, I think this might have come before
the
you
answer is
stressed
really
that.
no. I'm not connected to the major networks. You know, the major networks are pretty much a one-way communication. In fact, they can call you, but you can't call them back. So once you leave that world, sure, I have friends that are still in media, but you don't have the kind of connections. It's really a one-way street. And so it's all about presenting it in a way that scientists are one of the few people who can say, no, we're going to change the conversation. Okay. One of the few groups of people, because the average person, I could shout to the rafters, you know, animal agriculture is a leading cause of climate change. They're not going to take my word for it. And it's never going to get out there. And so it's only scientists and people with a PhD that have credibility. And then it's, where did they get their PhD? Well, luckily you got your PhD from Stanford, Dr. Rao, and you have tremendous credentials. All of that needs to go in there, because it's like, who is saying this? That is one of the biggest aspects of it. You know, the truth could be told by some person on the street and nobody's going to listen. That's the irony. It has to be told by a person that the powers that be will listen to. This is the key thing. It's like a lock. We're trying to get to the world and wake the world up. And it's become like we're picking a lock, or we've got to get the key. We don't have the key. It's the search for the Holy Grail, whatever you want to call it. It's not just going to happen with us chanting and marching. It has to happen. And this was the realization I had. It hit me like a ton of bricks, like, oh, of course, they're not, until it's established and people accept that animal agriculture is the leading cause, they will not discuss it. They will not change. They don't have to in their minds. It's like, until that doctor says to you, you've got cancer, you're not going to put that cigarette down. This is where we're at with our society. So that's the thing. It doesn't matter whether I know a couple of people. No, that's not how it works. It's a whole like trickle down. So if the scientists come from a certain place in a certain magazine with a certain amount of credibility, then certain people will publish it, and then certain other people will say, okay, I've got to talk about that.
Right.
And this is true of, by the way, every social justice movement. I learned a lot when I went to the Civil Rights Museum in Birmingham, Alabama, and they talked about why the African-American churches were more political than other churches. It's because the news media would never report, in the days of Jim Crow, what was happening in the African-American community, whether it was educational problems, supply problems, plumbing problems, any kind of problems. It was like it didn't happen. Okay. So in desperation, they would discuss these issues at their church, and the church became kind of like their news media, kind of like we use Facebook and Twitter and YouTube in our movement. And that's one of the reasons why African-American churches tend to be more political. I learned that going to the Civil Rights Museum. So what we're experiencing with the mainstream media blackout is just part of a social justice movement. At least that's how I see it.
Yep.
Okay. So here's a recommendation here. Let's have a debate with Dr. Rao and several of the most well-known climate scientists. Maybe Intelligence Squared can conduct the debate. Let's get the scientists who consulted with the UN, who say the number one cause is burning fossil fuels. And the UN actually did release a report that going vegan would help climate change. Did you see that?
Yeah, but it doesn't matter. It's not like, it's kind of like saying, hey, you know, by the way, it's an appetizer. We need to make this the main course. It's not,
Right.
it's not said in a way that has the urgency. it's not said like a cancer diagnosis where it really hits you. The reason I use that example was that he scared the wits out of me, this doctor. While I was sitting there and waiting for the results to come back, I was like, oh my God, I'm such an idiot. Why did I smoke? What a fool I am. Why did I ever pick up a cigarette? Blah, blah, blah. Then he comes back, he says, you're the only person I said today doesn't have cancer. You're lucky. Goodbye. It
That's
had a
amazing.
totally different impact on me than if somebody had said, cigarette smoking isn't good for you. You know, you shouldn't smoke. That's all theoretical. We need to hit people on a cellular level. We need the powers that be, the best and the brightest, which was a sarcastic title, to look at this and go, oh, bleep. This is for reals. We've got to all quit eating meat. It's over. Game over. That's what we need to have happen.
Right.
Right. Okay. So there's a question about having your paper peer reviewed.
Mm-hmm.
What about having it peer reviewed?
Yeah, if it has to, well, if we submit it to a journal like Science Magazine, it will be peer reviewed. They will send it to others and who will comment on it and then address the comments before it goes and gets published.
Do you get
I've
a
gone through
chance
that
to
before.
rebut? Do you get a chance to rebut?
Yeah, of course. So there's a process we go through. I have about 30 odd peer-reviewed papers in the technical literature. But that's from my old days. And so
well, you should include that. Include everything. You know, I've been around so long that I actually eliminate the first 3 or 4 jobs that I've had on my resume. But a lot of people, for example, know me as social media person. They may not know that I've written 4 books, 2 New York Times bestsellers. Right. They may not know that I had a show on CNN Headline News for 6 years. I put that in not to say, oh, look at me, but to give me credibility so that when I'm trying to change the world, people take me seriously. So right. Dr. Rao, you need to put everything and the kitchen sink in there to give yourself as much credibility. The animals cannot afford us to be modest or shy.
Yeah, no. I said that just to show that I know the process. I've gone through it before several times.
Yeah. So there's some conversation going on about India in the Facebook group, and India is the leading producer of the meat and dairy, or the
dairy industry, the dairy. Yeah.
The dairy. Okay, sorry, of the dairy. And it says, is it possible to bring a magazine or TV channel in India which can be dedicated to veganism, or a column in a nationwide newspaper?
Yeah, I would love for that to happen. Lots of magazines and shows in the US and in Europe, but we need to create that in India. And I think it'll happen automatically as the number of people grows.
Okay. Okay, let's see. I was surprised, but so pleased after I gave a presentation at a political group, and 2 people said they were amazed and are trying to go vegan. You have to quote the IPCC or Dr. Rao or Jim Henson. Keep on speaking up everywhere.
What's the IPCC?
It's the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. So that's the group that won the Nobel Peace Prize with Al Gore in some 2007 or 9 or something like that.
Got it.
And it has about 2,000 scientists who contribute to that. Yeah, they contribute to that.
So I guess if the IPCC said this, and why haven't they reached the conclusion then if it's so obvious to scientists?
Oh, they have reached the conclusion, but remember, it is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. So the governments have representatives as well who have to agree on the report. So the governments veto the report if you say anything about animal agriculture, if you point it out. But the scientists insist on putting the data out there, so it's there,
Can you point out in your position paper times when they've tried to explain this and the government has vetoed it? For historical perspective?
I don't know. I know that they have negotiations happening with the government representatives before they release the document, and they go through it word by word. and they have the right to veto it. Saudi Arabia has held up, the IPCC report. They have changed the language, so yeah.
Wow.
For the questions about raising the awareness in India, Madhavi says, we shall work on it. And the person whose show was being recommended that you be on, it was Lily Singh. And it says, we need Lily Singh as a vocal vegan ally. Okay, and let me read this one here on, let's see. Making sure, is the internet connection okay?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
I have to leave in a minute because I'm getting ready for my lunch break live. So I might
Okay.
have to wrap up.
Sure.
Okay.
Maybe I'll sign off now and let you guys continue. It's an honor. Dr. Rao, you give me hope for our world. Thank you, Deborah, for all you do. But seriously, you have the solutions, and we just have to figure out a way to get the world to hear you. So thank you. Onward, power ahead, and anything I can do to help you, I'm there.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jane.
You're
and just know,
awesome.
Jane, yesterday or throughout the week, people have been suggesting white papers for Sailesh to write. So I've got a list of those too.
Okay.
Yeah, well, this one is the one that should be top of the list. Okay, thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Leave meeting.
Okay, so let me get to some of the Zoom. Let's see, Dr. Rao, Jane, Deborah, you are amazing. Thank you. The vegan movement is growing exponentially. Yes, the V word is a trigger, yet the message of the damaging effects of animal agriculture is so necessary to inform the world of the perils of big ag. The idea of teaming up with Jane, a former journalist who can transcribe Dr. Rao's scientific expertise into language that is understood by the general public. The Big Island of Hawaii sponsors the Ironman event. Vega, a plant-based nutrition company, is one of the main sponsors. Game Changers is proving even elite athletes do not need to eat meat, eggs, or dairy to be the best you can be. Veganism is winning. Please continue your passion for the voiceless, animal agriculture, and our planet.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, let me just, Dr. L, I tell you what, while I'm going through this long list of comments here to see what we need to, where we left off, do you want to just read those 7 key points for people?
Yeah, the 7 transitions, 7 core transitions are from speciesism, colonialism, racism, patriarchy, and all the isms to veganism and radical equality, from diseases and divisions for humanity to health and unity for humanity, from destruction and pollution of the planet to remediation and regeneration of the planet, from death and cruelty to animals to love and kindness for animals, from a mindset of scarcity to a mindset of abundance, from a culture of consumption to a culture of compassion, and from a money-driven economy to a service-driven economy. So that I think encapsulates the core of this transformation that is happening.
Thank you. Thank you. I know that this is a, part of the intention for today is recapping and wrapping up and next steps for people. We've gotten a lot of next steps for you.
Yes.
I want to make sure that we have next steps for people as individuals. I mean, I know we hear the message, go vegan, and yes, help to spread the word, spread the message, and join us in the Climate Healers conference. And even if people can't come to the physical conference in Phoenix, there are ways that they can still plug in and be a part of the conversation, a part of the brainstorming, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, they can subscribe to our Facebook page, Climate Healers page. So you'll see posts and you'll see the events that are happening. They should share the videos that we may and share our posts in their network. Just spreading the word. That's one important thing that needs to happen. And of course, then the participating as either a protector or a hospice care worker or as an illuminator or as a trailblazer in the system transformation, joining climate healers and starting a climate healers group so that we can spread the word. We can screen the documentaries and spread the word throughout the world. So these are all ways in which people can participate. So please
Beautiful.
connect with us.
Beautiful. And I see that you have some assistance on your white paper. So that's fabulous.
That's wonderful. Yes.
Yes. And it looks like, Pareen, you got a chance to address Fridays for Future Activists, and you shared a link there. So I'll share that with our Facebook group as well. 2020, dawning of a new age, an exciting shift is upon us. Jupiter was also in Capricorn at that time and will be there again in 2020. A huge lineup of planets in Capricorn in 2020 means we will all be restructuring our world and our lives.
On that note,
I love it when it all comes together.
Right. On that note, that's amazing. So let's pray for that to happen.
Yes. Yes. As we support you, Sailesh, if we know humanity is becoming more conscious, we know, okay, we support you and we know that humanity is becoming more conscious.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. And I'm going to share the link to veganworld2026.com. Oh, I'm sorry, .org/conference.
Yeah.
Let me share that in both of the chats, and we will sign off for today. Thank you all very, very much. Thank you so much, Dr. Rao, for everything that you've given and for all that you're doing and continuing to do and for this mission. And I know more and more people are rallying behind you and coming in to help and support and to be a part of this movement that you've started. And with just much love and gratitude and admiration for what you're doing and for your granddaughter too. And hopefully we'll see a lot of people in Phoenix or signing on with the climate healers to be a part of these discussions continuing forward.
Yeah, thank you so much, Deborah. And without you and without all the people here participating, I'm nothing. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And thank you, everyone. So share these far and wide and share them with your communities and with your friends. Host a watch party, have a discussion. They're all on Facebook. They do not expire. They're there. And again, for more information on climate healers, you can go to climatehealers.org and also to veganworld2026.org. Thank you all very much. Thank you, Dr. Rao.
Thank you. Bye, Deborah.
Bye-bye.